Assalamu alaikum. Today our topic is about the history of the Muslim literature. So please like, subscribe and share my video and channel. Islamic literature may be treated at least under four heads: Arabic, Iranian, Turkish and Indian. Arabic literature. So the earliest prose records in Arabian language have been discovered in Saudi Arabia and found to be as old as the 3rd century BC. The historical date of the classical Arabic begins about a century before the birth of Hazrat Muhammad, peace be upon him. This does not mean that there was no literature before that date. We may say that the earlier literature has not survived to our own times. The meeting places of pre-Islamic Arab poets were annual fairs. The subject of their poetry was the description of the desert, the site of a former encampment, praise of one's own horse or camel to whose swiftness the ostrich, the wind or the wild ass was compared, tribal life, thunderstorm, one owns or his tribe's bravery, description of an attack over an enemy and plunder of the camp, songs longing after the beloved, praise of a hero or patron, etc. Arabic literature after the rise of Islam may be divided into three periods. The first may be reckoned from the birth of Islam to the death of Hazrat Ali. This period produced a large number of poets and poetesses, but the Quran had attracted so much attention from the people that poetry had come to lose its former popularity. Quran, the sacred book of Islam, was believed by all Muslims to be the inspired word of Allah, the most pure in language and the most beautiful in sight, style that no human genius can either imitate or produce one like that. The first 30 years of the Khilafat passed in the conquest and the settlements of the Arabics in Syria, Palestine, Iran, Egypt and North Africa. Hazrat Ali's successor Muawiyah, though a man of the world too much absorbed in politics and affairs of the administration and the consolidation of the power, was yet a seeker of knowledge and a patron of learning. During his reign, the pre-Islamic style in poetry revived and once again the simplicity of desert life was praised. Muawiyah was fond of hearing historical events retold, for which purpose and for hearing legendary stories he invited from Yemen an old narrator of tales named Abid, son of Sharia, to his court and induced him to put all that he knew into writing. The period covered by the Abbasid Khilafat was the golden age of the Arabic learning. The system of education which had been developed during the Umayyad rule extended and reached the highest standard during this period. The Umayyad Khalifas were Arab in spirit and form. Their advisors and counselors were Syrian, but the Abbasids were helped by Iranians, and their period is noted for the fusion of Semitic with Aryan cultures. The Semitic race represented by the Arabs, Jews, Armenians and Syrians, and by the Aryan by the Iranians, Indians, Greeks and Romans, took part in molding into shape a new culture, having Islamic teaching as its basis. The first 7 Khalifas of the Abbasid dynasty were all learned men and patrons of learning. They established a committee known as the House of Wisdom, to which several scholars were appointed to translate various works from the Syrian, Iranian and the Indian languages. Men from distant places gathered at the capital Baghdad. The Abbasids have shown, with a few exceptions, much toleration towards non-Muslims. Some of the greatest poets and storytellers of this times are Abu Nuwas, Abul Atahiyya Ismail, Muti, Ahmad known as Mutanabbi, Abul Ala Mu'arri of Syria. In Egypt, Rashid, son of Ishaq, flourished about 850 AD. He has left a divan. In Spain, Ibn Zaydun and Muhammad, son of Hani, who was called the Mutanabbi of the West, were two great poets of the time. During this period, rhymed prose became popular and several works were written in this style. Among these are the sermons of Ibn Nabata. Badius Zama, a native of Hamadan, wrote his celebrated assemblies known as maqamat or short lectures. The modern period of Arabic literature begins with the invasion of Egypt by the French under Napoleon and the occupation of that country by the British. It was noted in its earlier days for the revival of the classical style in poetry and afterwards for the gradual influence exerted on the European modes of thought and style. Among the noted poets are Nasif, son of Abdullah, known as Yaziji. As a poet, he was an admirer and follower of the celebrated Mutanabbi and wrote a commentary on his divan. Yaziji's poems were published in the 3 volumes. He also left a prose work in the classical style of Maqamat under the title of Majma'ul Bahrain. He had great command of the language and may be compared to Muhammad Hussain Azad of India. The earliest traces of Arabic drama are to be found in the art haki or narration of stories. The famous European traveler named Newborough received Cairo in and visited Cairo in 1770 and has given a fair description of the Rawi or storytellers of Egypt. Such men were found all over West and Central Asia. The present tendency among literary men of the East is to follow the European authors' research work and criticism of the early authors. Among the more notable women writers in Arabic are Warda Yaziji, who was a poetess, Mariana Marash, and Afifa Karam. In literary criticism, Taha Hussain, Ahmad Amin, Zakal Mubarak, and Kamil Kilani have an established reputation. Khairuddin Zurukli and Ilyan Sarkis have written on bibliographical topics. Number 2. Turkish literature. The Turkish language belonged to the Ural-Altaic family divided into several dialects. The majority of the Turkish-speaking people are inhabitants of Russia and eastern China. Arabic characters were used by all Muslims in Turkestan, Iran, Turkey, Egypt, North Central Africa and India, but with the exception of Arabic, they were not suited to the languages spoken by non-Arab Muslims. They were adopted for the facility they give for reading the Quran and other theological and philosophical works in Arabic. Turkish literature may be divided into three parts. The earliest, which begins with the rise of the Ottoman Empire and extends to the reign of Sultan Muhammad from 1230 to 1839, may be called the Irano-Turkish period. During this long time, covering over 6 centuries, Iranian influence was predominant. Ottoman rulers were on the whole great patrons of learning. Some of them could themselves write good Iranian, and 25 out of 36 sultans were gifted with the literary talents. Sultan Salim, the conqueror of Egypt, was a fine scholar in Iranian. He was a poet and the author of the Diwan. The second period, too short, is most important. It is chiefly noted for the modernizing spirit that dominates. It is influenced largely by the European context and thought. Many works on different subjects were translated from the French into Turkish. Classical Turkish writers had followed the Indian style and more for erotical effects than for the subject matter. The new school, however, was made up of writers who were admirers of French writers, of French style and French subjects of fiction and objects of poetical imagination. The modernizing movement began in the reign of the enlightened monarch Sultan Mahmud, who endeavored to Europeanize his army and administration, and followed by an equal progressive successor, Sultan Abdul Majid, whose famous Firman Gul Khana was the beginning of the reform and a new phase of administration based on the European system. This period ended with the World War I, breaking up old imperial Turkey into a well and new knit republic. The third and the present period begins with the birth of the Turkish Republic and the Kemalist movement, whose object was to mold the different races of Asia Minor into one solid Turkish-speaking nation and to completely Europeanize it so that it might not to any extent differ from any other European state, either in its social life or the form of its government. They are indifferent to religion and wish to retain as much of it as can help to render progressive Turkey as a nation. They have given help to Arabic characters, a medium of the script, to most of it, the Muslims, which is unfortunately ill-suited not only to Turkish but also to Iranian and Urdu, and adopted the Roman alphabets with certain modifications to make it suit Turkish. Books on science and arts are being translated. A large number of newspapers and magazines are being published. Foreign words from Arabic and Iranian are less used into the Turkish literature and language. Iranian language. The history of Iranian literature may be divided into pre-Islamic and post-Islamic period. The pre-Islamic period may be further subdivided into the Avestan period, the Achaemenian period, and the Pahlavi period. Of these, the Avestan is the period earliest form of the Iranian language in which the hymns of the Zoroastrian creeds have been composed. The Avestan dialect has a very close resemblance to the language of the Vedic hymns. The second subdivision period, known as the Achaemenian periods, consisted of Achaemenian rulers of Iran, including Cyrus, Darius, Xerxes, and Artaxerxes I, Artaxerxes II, and Artaxerxes III, which have left several inscriptions in Persepolis, Behistun, and other parts of Iran. The writing in which these inscriptions have been composed is called cuneiform. Their inscriptions give a very brief account of the deeds and conquest of the said kings. These mark the second period. The third pre-Islamic period may be called Pahlavi, dating from about 300 BC to 900 AD. Pahlavi is written in the Aramaic alphabet. It is a modified form of Old Iranian and contains many Aramaic words. Its grammar has been simplified from Old Persian, but its alphabet is defective and therefore its study is found difficult by modern scholars. With the death of Yazdekerd, the last Sasanian king in 651 AD, Iran became a great province of the Arab Khilafat, and by the end of the Umayyad period, a large number of Iranians embraced Islam. They were attached to the new religion and expected better treatment and higher social position with the ruling class. They Arabicized themselves. They adopted the Arabic names not only for them but also for some of their non-Muslim forefathers, and by becoming a Halif or partners of an Arab tribe, they added the tribal name to their own names. Arabic became the vehicle of their thoughts. They composed their poetical and other works in that language. The earliest Iranian Muslim was a seeker of truth from a village near Asfahan. His Arabic name was Salman, originally a Zoroastrian. He embraced Christianity and, not being satisfied with the Christian doctrine, accidentally met the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and accepted his teachings. He was a zealous Muslim and so sincerely served the Prophet that once he said, "Salman is a member of my family." There are many Arab poets who are Iranians, but through they retained their national love for Iran. Hamad, son of Shahpur, was the most celebrated collector and compiler of pre-Islamic Arab poetry and the legends and genealogy of Arab tribes. Wahab, son of Munabbih, was an Iranian whose father and grandfather had immigrated to Yemen during the reign of Khusru Parvez. Among the greatest and most famous Muslim poets, literary men, philosophers, theologians, etc., we found Iranians whose work were standards of learning not only in Islamic countries but in Europe also. In the meanwhile, the Iranian language, though neglected by its speakers, did not disappear completely. During the Khilafat of Mamun, the semi-independent rule of an Iranian family known as Tahirid was established in Khurasan. There were many others, including the Samanid, Ghaznavids, and others. The other famous poet of the Samanid court was Daqiqi, who attempted the verifying of the epic of the pre-Islamic Iran but was killed before completing work. Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni had a large number of poets at his court. Among these were Unsari, Farukhi, Manuchehri, Azjudi, and last but not least Firdausi, the author of the great Persian epic entitled Shahnamah. This book, composed in about 60,000 verses, gives the best description of the customs, manners, religions, ethics, and the social and intellectual life of the Iranians. It contains historical events mixed with the ancient legend. Firdausi is the most brilliant poet of Iran, whose name and work will always be respected and admired by his countrymen. There are many other periods of Iranian, and moreover, one of the greatest period is the Seljuk period. After the Seljuk end, there were also other periods. The other princes of the Chengiz family were the great rulers of China, Central Asia, and South Asia. During their rule, China reopened commercial relations with Iran. A number of Chinese artists and artisans found their way to Iran, and many Iranian scholars settled in China. Fortunately, the Mughal branch, which is ruled over Iran, adopted the religion of their oppressed subjects and became reconciled to them. Here, the Mughal means Mongols. There was a revival of learning and arts which reached its zenith. It was a revival of learning plus arts also, and architecture, which reached its zenith in the rule of the Timurid princes. The Mongol period of Iranian art and literature is noted for the development of the Irano-Chinese style in painting, which was introduced by the Mongol rulers in India. In literature, many important works were written, among them being the following: Jahangusha by Ata Malak Juwaini, Wasaf by Abdullah son of Fazlullah, Jami'ut Tarikh by Rashid ud-Din Fazlullah, Gozidah by Hamadullah Mustafi, Rozatus Safa by Muhammad Kavand Shah, and Habibus Siyar by his grandson Ghiyasuddin. All these works are on history. Among biographers of the poets, the following are worthy of note: Tazkare Daulat Shah and Labul Lubab of Ofi. The Mughal period of Iranian history ends in about 1525 when a new indigenous dynasty named Safavid was established in India. The ancestor of the Safavi empire was one Sheikh Safiuddin, a Sufi age, who lived in Aradabil, northwest Iran. He was admired and respected by Timur. When Timur returned from his expedition in Asia Minor, he had a large number of Turkish captives whom he released at the request of Safiuddin. These men became his followers and devotees and remained loyal to his family after his death. After his descendants, Junaid married a sister of the reigning king Uzan Hassan and by her had a son named Haider, whose ambition was more to rule than remain a Sufi pir. Though he failed in his object, his young son Ismail succeeded in founding the glorious Safavid Empire. At this time, two other Muslim empires existed or began to exist in the west and east of Iran. The rulers of these were the Ottoman sultans of Turkey and Timurid emperors of India called Mughals. Both of these were followers of the Sunni sect in Islam. To make their position strong and their dynasty well established, the Safavids supported Shiaism in Iran, whose followers till that time were weak. Thus, Iran became secluded from the two sides. Sunni Iranians were persecuted and driven out of the country or were made to embrace the new established state religion. Ismail was followed by Shah Tahmasp and Abbas the Great, who were the contemporaries of Humayun and Akbar in India. After the period ended of the Safavid dynasty, then started the Qajar dynasty. Nasiruddin, the fourth ruler of Qajar dynasty, was crowned in 1848. The chief events of his reign are the rise of Babi and Baha'i sects and the modernization of Iran. The former, in spite of severe persecution and execution of its leader Mirza Ali Muhammad Bab and the deportation of his followers, made considerable progress both in and outside of Iran. There were also many other kings and others. Nasiruddin was a man of weak character and showed no initiative in reforming the country. In the meantime, his subjects followed his example and traveled through Europe, imbibed the ideas of others. There were also pan-Islamist movements. One of them was Sayyid Jamaluddin of Hamadan, known as Afghani. There was a strong propaganda for constitutional government. In consequence, Nasiruddin was assassinated by an admirer of Jamaluddin named Mirza Riza. Besides the above, Iranian literature also developed outside of Iran, particularly in India, which is considered the second home of the Iranian language. The earliest known Iranian author in India was Abu Rehan al-Biruni, and the greatest of them was Sir Muhammad Allama Iqbal. The last but not the least is the Indian languages. The Indian languages can be divided into two parts, Urdu and Hindi literature. Urdu of today and Hindi are both offshoots of an older Hindi dialect spoken in the United Province called Uttar Pradesh. It is difficult to fix their direct relation or any particular dialect, as both are spoken over a large area, particularly so Urdu, and have undergone so much mixture. Urdu is a mixture of some of the words, most of the words of Iranian, some Hindi and Arabic, and some of its own Urdu dialect. As we know that the most important Urdu work were done in Delhi and Lucknow and Hyderabad and in the Deccan. In Delhi, last of the Mughal ruler was Bahadur Shah Zafar, who was one of the greatest poets there. The first Mughal rulers were Iranians or the Persians, but he developed as one of the greatest Urdu poets. These are the four greatest literature of the Muslim literature, and we have also described the history of this literature. So our video ends.